Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SaaS Leaders Lounge. And today I'm joined by the founder of Horizon3.ai, Snehal Antani. How are you doing? Nice for you to join us today.
Likewise, Paris. Thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I guess with RSA around the corner, it's great to have some founders to share their journey and explain what they're doing in the market. So just to start with, before we dive into, the nitty gritty of what Horizon are doing at the moment, I just wanted to understand, and for the audience to understand a bit more about your background. You've held some prestigious positions at some great organizations in the past. Talk to us about your journey into technology and where it all started.
Yeah, sure. So I'll lead with kind of my main roles, and then I'll go to where things started for me. So I graduated with a computer science degree from Purdue, and then started my career at IBM, where I was a software engineer. So working on WebSphere middleware type products. Grew up on the mainframe, and then worked on distributed systems. That was really kind of my area of specialty. And then left IBM to be a CIO within GE Capital. Incredibly interesting job because I got to learn how to manage large teams and deal with organizational change at scale, as well as learning how to leverage technology to create a competitive advantage. I often joke that when at GE Capital or GE generally, when people like me walked into the room, people thought we were there to fix the projector, right? And how do you earn a seat at the table and show the art of the possible technology brings in terms of revenue creation and creating a competitive advantage? In 2015, when Capital was divested from the rest of GE, I left and became the CTO at Splunk and moved from the East Coast to the Bay Area. And for about 3 years, I was the CTO of Splunk, working with Splunk's largest customers, as well as working on emerging use cases in Internet of Things, industrial IoT, business analytics, government type projects, and so on and so forth. And it was amazing because at Splunk, I got to learn about how to build a sales machine at scale. I got to study under some pretty amazing people, Susan St. Ledger, who was the head of sales at the time, Dave Conti, who was a CFO at the time. And in every job I took because I was going to maximize my learning. And I had very intentional things I wanted to learn. So at GE, it was about learning how to transform and drive change at scale. At Splunk, it was about how to build a large-scale sales organization and run a SaaS company at scale. And then in 2017, I left industry altogether, took a break, and chose to serve within U.S. Special Operations as its first CTO. And that was the hardest, most meaningful work of my career. In what I really got to learn was I got to learn about leadership, from the best leaders and from the best performing teams in the world. And it was just an absolute amazing experience that called upon my background of change at scale, leveraging technology to create an advantage, and so on. And then from there, I left Special Operations and co-founded Horizon 3 with my then deputy CTO at JSOC, Tony. And now I've basically planned my whole life to start a company. And when I finally did, I did so with the hope that I accumulated the right experiences and Lego blocks required to do it well. And so here we are, about 4 years into the journey. I've raised $80 million in venture capital, over 1,300 customers. Last year, we doubled revenue and doubled net sales efficiency, navigating some fairly tumultuous markets. And we're on quite a pace to create a really valuable and really interesting company.
I've been in awe of you from a distance for a couple of years. So it's great to see that, since founding the company in 4 years, especially in those difficult moments through COVID, where there was a lot of uncertainty, people's working conditions change, budgets change, for you guys to come out, growing is great to see. And I guess when you was taking these different positions, you mentioned that were enabling you to learn the skill sets required. Did you have an idea then of the type of company you were going to create, or was it, later on down the line that you decided, okay, Horizon 3 is going to be based on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'd always been intrigued with the world of hacking. I think everyone has. I was a lot closer to it when I was young, and then I got the scared straight, message from my dad who said, "Look, if you go down this path, you're gonna get in trouble, so don't do it." And but I'd always been intrigued by that world. But when you're starting a company, there's many different ways to start a company, many different ideas. Some people will start a company because they're pursuing a passion of theirs. I took a more pragmatic approach. So what I looked at were three different ideas that I thought were going to be interesting. The first one was, and the thing with starting a company and ideas are, the idea doesn't matter early, the team matters. But then if you want to start a finance company and you hire a bunch of hacker nerds, well, you've got a mismatch of skills. So you want to have some alignment of skills to the idea, but the actual precise idea in the early stages, irrelevant. It's about building the right team. So what I focused on was, even though I had a few ideas which I'll talk to, I focused on getting myself into various engineering circles and talent circles so that I could find that early team. And I found that early team through this incredible talent pool of retiring military personnel. So when you think about what makes people in special operations special is not that they can run far, shoot well, or swim fast. It's that they are learn-it-alls that can solve any problem as a team under pressure. And that is the exact mindset you want to have in an early stage company, because it is chaos, absolute chaos. Every day you're doing 50 different jobs. You don't know what right is going to look like. You've got to learn and adapt. And so that special operations community became this incredibly amazing talent pool from which I could draw different types of talent as they retired from the service. Because my other kind of personal rule was the national security fight, the counterterrorism fight at the time was far more important than anything else. So don't poach talent from that community. But when those folks naturally retire as they hit their 20 years or whatever, give them, try to find a way to recruit them so they can go off and apply their skills and have a greater impact from a tech standpoint.
And on that piece that you mentioned about the importance of bringing in the right people early on, I've also seen that you've emphasized on some articles the importance of leading from the front, culture and enablement. So when you was putting together that executive or leadership team, how did you embed all of these ideas into that?
The reality is I definitely made some bad hires early. And part of that was hiring during COVID was incredibly difficult. So one, it was really hard to assess someone's capabilities and skills remotely. At the time, we didn't have that muscle memory. A remote interview process was just something that wasn't overly common at the time. I never expected to run a remote company. We are now, at the end of the year, we'll have 170 employees, probably scattered around 35 to 40 states and 5 countries or something like that. I never expected to be fully remote, and to define and maintain a culture in a remote company, especially in a scaled remote company, is really, really hard. As a result, the mistake I made was I tried to focus on hiring people I already knew. So they weren't necessarily the right fit, but I made a bet that they can learn on the job. Yeah. Some people did with wild success, and for other people, it just wasn't the right fit. They weren't used to the tumultuousness that is startups, the change in directions, the sensitivity to market conditions, and so on and so forth. And so I think that we learned a lot in the first few years on what the right type of talent in a remote, high growth company needs to be. And so really thinking about how, and then from there, we've completely revamped our hiring processes as a result. And so I think that every company went through those growing pains, but it was especially challenging in a remote first workforce through and post COVID.
Thank you for sharing it. I guess in the year 1 to year 2 to year 3, I guess once you made those initial hires and you understood that there was changes that needed to be made, would you say the importance of the execution of speed to hire and firing these people was important? Because when I speak to founders, often that is, especially in larger companies, the challenge is that you maybe can't fire people as fast as you want to, but in a smaller business, you have the agility to do so.
Yeah, except you have the agility to do so, but there's something that you've got to take into account as a founder, as a manager. You've just like Paris, if you come join Horizon 3, think about how excited you are the day you accept the offer, and then the weeks in between you start, and your family's excited. If you have kids, your kids are excited. Your friends are pumped for you. You've posted on social media. I mean, there's a lot of emotion that goes into changing jobs and starting at a new company. And then imagine how deflated you feel, 90 days later, if you're working for a cutthroat team that's ready to kick you to the curb. They're looking for a reason to get rid of you. I hate that experience. I mean, I think that that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. You don't want to create a boiler room of hire fast, fire fast, because I mean, it's not right for the individual. And then two, it's not good for the company and the culture and the morale. And so what we really thought through was, all right, we hired too quickly, and let's take a step back and understand what are the right attributes we need to be looking for, and how do we filter those out in the interview process better. And then the second part is, it's pretty rare to hire duds. It's just something that isn't very common. Most people have some talent you saw, you brought them in for a reason, and either their talent was overstated, you didn't set the right conditions for their success, or the expectations were just a complete mismatch. Right? It's usually one of those three things. Hopefully, it's not because their talents were overstated. Although that's actually become a big problem in the ChatGPT era, where everyone's resumes look and sound the same. But that's another thing. And so, did you set the right conditions for that person to succeed? Did they have a manager that knew how to empower them versus control them? Did you help discover their plateau versus define their plateau? Did you provide honest, respectful communication so that they understood what they were doing well and where they needed to improve? These are things that in a more senior company, an older company, they've got a lot of processes and management training programs and stuff in place. In smaller companies, those tend to be nascent. So if you hire first-time managers that don't have the experience of enabling versus controlling, for instance, you're going to have issues. So what we then realized was we really needed to surge in investing in bringing out the best in our managers, who then in turn can bring out the best in our people.
Great. Enablement is a huge piece of success. And if we talk about Horizon 3, as you mentioned, in 4 years, you've achieved a lot, almost 200 employees scattered across 5 continents. And it was only 14 months before, if I'm right, you acquired your 100th customer from your first in October 2020. So I really want to understand more about Horizon 3, what the product is doing in the market that's really different, and how you was able to acquire so many customers. What did they see in the product, and what problems were you solving?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I was a CIO in my time at DoD, I had no idea I was secure until the bad guys showed up. Am I fixing the right vulnerabilities? Am I logging the right data in Splunk? Does my team know how to respond to a breach? And the answer is, I don't know, right? Let's find out when we get breached. Let's see what the incident response process tells us, and then we'll improve from there. And that to me just felt ridiculous. I wanted to proactively verify my security posture. The only option at the time was to go off and contract consultants to show up. Now, those consultants would take 8 to 12 weeks to get to my door. From there, they would only test a very narrow slice of my environment. They would pwn us, embarrass us, punch us in the face, leave behind a PDF report. And then when I needed them to come back and retest to verify I fixed everything, they'd either laugh and say, wait 3 months, or they'd say, yeah, here's another bill for the retest. And that didn't feel very sustainable. What I wanted to do was, for every patch Tuesday, there's a pen test Wednesday. Every time I make a major change in the network, I wanted to run a pen test. Every time I onboard new employees, I wanted to run a pen test to verify my credential policies, so on and so forth. But there just wasn't enough supply of pen testers to meet that demand. In fact, there's only 20 or so thousand OSCP certified ethical hackers globally. There's only about 5,000 in the United States. And it takes 10 years to become a senior pen tester. So, because it's a very hard skill to acquire. So what we needed was a force multiplier in the market. And my leap of faith was, can I build an AI engine that knows nothing about an environment, that can conduct recon, enumeration, and execute self-directed actions to compromise and steal data or become domain admin or whatever else? Like, that was the big leap. And at the time, the state of the art was breach and attack simulation type companies trying to automate pen testing, which is honestly impossible to do. Think of when IBM played Garry Kasparov in chess. IBM didn't hard code 40 million chess games. They looked at every piece on the board and determined the next best action. Similarly here, you can't automate pen testing. There are way too many permutations. What you need is self-directed actions based on what you've discovered with a feedback loop for continuous learning. Those are like the big ideas. It had never been done before. But I had the right team, and we 9 months later, we had the first version of NodeZero out the door. The very basic prototype back in 2019 was run an Nmap scan, pipe that into Neo4j to build a knowledge graph of what we've discovered, and then write a selection algorithm to select what Metasploit module to run. Super cheesy, super easy prototype. But when my co-founder, Tony, ran it against his home network, he found a default web server running on a sound card he had no idea was there with default admin credentials. And he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I had no idea this is in my environment. I was absolutely exposed. We're onto something big. And now extrapolate that to every knowledge graph we build in a pen test has hundreds of millions of nodes and edges. And we've got highly efficient selection algorithms that can dynamically chain together credentials, misconfigurations, exploitable CVEs, and so on to steal data and do other things like that. So the underlying problem was hiring manual consultants just wasn't scalable. We pioneered AI to hack, but we gift wrapped it in a user experience designed for IT admins and network engineers that have zero pen testing experience. Because if you look at the data, there are hundreds of thousands of people with a CISSP. Said there's only 5,000 with an OSCP in the United States. So hundreds of thousands of people that have like kind of that network engineering, security knowledge, but they don't have that elite pen testing requirement. So by targeting the fixers, the people that struggle to fix the problems that have been identified, we had a mass audience that could use the product. And so we made the experience self-service UX for IT admins and network engineers that think pen testing is magic, but whose expertise is fixing stuff. And sure enough, within, I can't remember how long it took to hit our 100th customer, but within 3 years, we're at over 1,300 end customers using the product, which is one of the fastest growth rates out there.
I did see that from my notes. I had it at 14 months it took to get to 100 customers. And then if you do the numbers from 100 to almost 1,300 or so in the following, year and a half is astronomical numbers. And as you mentioned, something that was intriguing there was the importance of user-friendly user experience for the targeted audience and users that you plan to use the solution. So in terms of when you was going through different prototypes, how did you kind of suggest or select the idea that this user interface is going to be the right one for the customers?
Yeah, so there's kind of a Steve Jobs philosophy. If you read about kind of the invention of the iPod, what he said was, I want to get to any song in 3 clicks. Like, that was the design experience. And then, if you read Walter Isaacson's book, I think that's where it was, the team came back and got there in 5 clicks. And he said, nope, 3 clicks, go back. And so there was this maniacal focus on the end user experience. Because at Horizon 3, we were all practitioners, we had a maniacal focus on the end user experience because we were the users. So we said at the beginning, 3 clicks. You should be able to run a pen test, an internal pen test in 3 clicks. Not 4, not 5, in 3. And we got there. And then in the alternative was 8 to 12 weeks of paperwork. 3 clicks versus 8 to 12 weeks of paperwork. That 3 clicks UX is going to win every single time. In fact, I got into a Twitter fight last year, which was hilarious in its own way, because the marketing team on our booth said the power of a 20-year pen testing expert in 3 clicks, which was true at the time, but those 20-year pen testing experts got very offended of how dare we, how dare we make that claim. We've since matured, and we don't use that slogan anymore, but that was the design principle. You come up with a crazy experience up front. You use that to force your design. You don't sacrifice the that particular design point, and you design the entire UX around that 3 clicks to an aha moment. And the more aha moments you can design in, the more addictive your product becomes. Godfrey Sullivan, who I used to work for, he was the CEO of Splunk, used to say, your product experience should be so powerful, people need a cigarette at the end of it.
I agree. And in terms of, Horizon 3 branching out, now it's, kind of a global operation you're setting up at the moment. Could you maybe share a standout example of how Horizon 3 AI solution has really helped a customer improve their cybersecurity posture?
Yeah, there's I'll give you 3 examples. So the first example is when I was a CIO, the hardest part of the job was deciding what vulnerabilities to not fix. Because the moment I choose not to fix a vulnerability, I'm accepting liability. Because if that vulnerability leads to an exploit down the road, I'm going to be dragged in front of the board, and I've got to explain to them why I didn't think it was interesting. So that was a nerve-wracking experience, right, to decide what to fix and what not to fix. And so the first big outcome was IT ops teams and network engineering teams being given a list of 100,000 vulnerabilities that were found by like Qualys or Nessus or whatever. Maybe 10 or 15 of those 100,000 are actually exploitable. Maybe. But even then, the exploitability was really rare and obtuse conditions, like you needed physical access to the network plane while standing on 1 foot juggling a pizza. Like some crazy conditions like that. And so what we were able to focus on initially was, are you exploitable? And we would actually run the commands, the malicious command injections, and so on, and actually exploit you and prove that, yes, this problem is exploitable, and here is proof. This other problem is not exploitable, and here's our attempt that failed. So between those two, focus on what's exploitable. So the very first aha moment for our customers was being able to fiercely prioritize problems that mattered. And we saw this as the consistent use case across the board. After that, the next thing that came up was, and this is this natural product evolution. So as we started to see customers successfully fix exploitable problems and quickly retest and so on, the next thing became, hey, when you dumped credentials out of vCenter, or when you dropped a rat on a host, why did Splunk nor CrowdStrike send any alerts? Or why did my team not detect and respond to that? Or why did my MSSP not respond to that? So the natural next adjacency became using us as a sparring partner to improve your own defensive tools. And so then it was, hey, you're missing these logs in Splunk, or you did not enable OS credential dumping in Trend Micro or whatever product you're using. And now you're actually able to find blind spots in your security tools. And we have a whole bunch of stories around customers spending millions of dollars on SIEMs and EDRs and not configuring them correctly and having a false sense of security. And then the third big use case became after that, hey, whenever a new celebrity CVE makes it into the news, like a CISA KEV or whatever, time is the enemy, and I need to rapidly test at scale just that specific problem. So then the next use case became rapid response. And what we found was, early on with our customers, we had all of their pen test results. So we could query and say, hey, you actually have Avanti at this version on these 3 IPs. If you're not aware of this, you better go patch these as soon as possible because the latest Avanti CVE targets it. And the reaction from our customers was, oh my God, you just saved us. We had no idea we had these exploitable systems. Your proactive notification bailed me out, and I could prove that we'd fixed the problem. So when you think about that progression as a founder building product, you start with the first pain, and then you have to have very disciplined processes to discover the next pain, and then you address the next pain, discover the next pain. It's all about what's your headache and what Tylenol can I give you? And those became the first 3 big ones. The newest one now is customers are fixing their own security posture, but now they're worried about their critical suppliers, because there's this story of the Japanese armed the Ukrainians. Allegedly, the Russians got angry and ransomwared a small company in Tokyo. That company in Tokyo provided all of the cup holders to Toyota. Toyota shut down 28 production lines, and it cost them almost $400 million in economic damage due to just-in-time logistics and lean manufacturing. And the flex was not that the Russians could ransomware a small company. It's that they knew where to apply the least amount of effort to cause the maximum amount of pain. So now the fourth headache that our customers are bringing to us is, hey, we've got 1,000 suppliers, but these 100 are mid-market or SMBs somewhere in the world that we don't believe have any good security. Please pen test them on our behalf and tell us how much better their security posture is improving over time. So now the fourth use case is supplier security posture. And so that's the key as a founder and as a product team in a startup is you need to blend intuition of what you need to build next with feedback from customers. And that's the magic that helps make sure you're building things that customers want.
I agree, but the question mark we find with startups is often, how far do you go, right? Because if every customer has bespoke requirements that they need, how sustainable is it for you to start, focusing your efforts on, tailor making solutions to solve individual problems? What is, defined as, okay, this is scalable for our customers in this segment or this segment. So in terms of that approach and that aspect, how does Horizon, decide on, okay, we're going to take our product roadmap down this way, or we're going to stay, in this area here where we're comfortable and we know inside out?
Yeah, when I think about, there are several reasons why companies fail. One is they run out of money, but part of running out of money is because they failed to achieve product market fit. They failed to achieve a set of stories that were valuable enough for someone to pay and were consistent enough to be repeatable across a large base. So there's a big challenge. Defense tech is really hot right now, but there's a really big problem in defense tech investments, which is, hey, is that idea a one-off only relevant for like the Army? Or is this idea where the Army is going to be first movers and JP Morgan's going to be a fast follower? And so most of the time the trap is you build a bespoke one-off solution that has no repeatability across customers and markets. And this goes back to discipline from a product management and engineering standpoint. Yes, you want intuition. Where do I, the whole, if I did what people asked, we would have faster horses. Intuition was we needed a car. So there is intuition about where people want to be. There is the feedback loop of what your users and customers are telling you. And then there is the process of telling stories to quickly validate an idea with as many people as possible. And it is some magic pixie dust that combines those three things together that leads to a successful product market fit journey. And so for us, for instance, intuition, has a series of budgets I want to go after. And then I would pitch those as stories to as many people as I could. And I didn't care about the reaction of whether, oh, that's a great idea. What I cared about were the challenge questions that person was going to ask me. Because if I didn't have a good understanding of the challenge questions, I haven't properly thought through the idea. And that became the early way for us to figure out the next major set of features to ship. And then from there, I would have enough of an understanding of the story that I could work with the engineering team, take a couple of paragraphs of a story and watch my engineering team apply their talent and magic and turn that couple of paragraphs into a full, robust set of capabilities, right? But it all started with validating through storytelling those ideas with anyone that would listen to me.
Thank you. And if I got it correct, if I'm kind of summarizing it from where I hear it, it's that NodeZero's product is really aiming to empower organizations as, Horizon 3 are going to be sparring partners for them to really reduce their security risk while continuously improving their security posture, which every organization wants. But as Horizon's grown, 5-10-fold, how has your strategy had to change to keep up with, the sustainability and make sure that the productivity and efficiency of the organization continues on an upward curve?
Yeah, so there's two dimensions to that answer. The first dimension is, articulate a vision for where we're going to be. If you actually go to the Horizon 3 website, under About Us, under Our Vision, you can see the vision paper that Tony and I put together 5 years ago on here's what Horizon 3 is going to look like with 3 chapters. Chapter 1, master the art of attack by being the best pen testing solution in the world. Chapter 2, understand our pen testing results over time and use that to take out adjacent budget in external attack surface management, vulnerability prioritization, governance, risk, and compliance, and so on. And then chapter 3 is use offense to inform defense. How do I use pen testing results as a way to improve the how my EDR behaves, how my SIM behaves, so on and so forth? And how do I create an integrated learning loop between offense and defense, which has never been done before? Those are the 3 chapters. We wrote it as like a 12-page vision paper, put it on the website for all to read and see, in part because, like, hey, if my competitive advantage can't withstand a paper, I've got bigger problems. So with that, the next part is, that's the longer vision. It's down and in, tactical. Now as a CEO, the hard part of the job is deciding what not to implement. And how do I make sure I have a bias towards, dreaming of the next solution? I have to be careful not to thrash my engineering team and make sure that they're not just chasing tennis balls, which is the next good idea. So I have to have discipline as a CEO to bite my tongue and be very careful on how many new ideas I'm feeding the team, because everyone wants to pounce on the next new idea from the boss. And now it's all about building robust product management processes in place to be able to ship capabilities with discipline. And that's kind of the next phase of growth that we've entered into as a company.
Amazing. And the About Us page, obviously, as you said, is pretty extensive and really showcases what the company is doing. And the explainability aspect of NodeZero is also fascinating. In a landscape where skepticism towards automated tools exists, we look at, generative AI, you mentioned, about ChatGPT earlier. Lots of people are meeting it with skepticism. So I just want to understand, from your perspective, embedding AI into cybersecurity tools, is that something you're seeing is going to become the norm over the next 5 or 10 years? And how do you stay on top of the AI element of the solution, making sure that there's no...
So let's talk about this from a defensive tool set for a moment, right? So remember, I was the CTO of Splunk, and I was a CIO that had to use all of the latest and greatest tools in every part of the defensive stack. I think that we're going to see a couple of things happen, and we're going to see it at RSA this in the next 2 weeks, right? There are 3 things happen. The first thing that already started to happen was the great sameness. Everyone started to sound the same, because all the content marketing folks and website folks and sales enablement people and whatever else, they're all going to ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT to write a blog on AI for EDR and endpoint defense. And everyone's picking in, the same terminology and the same phrases. And it's becoming very difficult for end customers and prospects to differentiate one solution from another, which actually means in the sales process, relationship or referral-based selling becomes the most important aspect of sales. The second thing that's happening is everyone's coming out with a copilot. Everyone's building some LLM chat interface to their product suite because that's the easy button to go off and do. And they're basically training LLMs on their internal documentation, their customer support knowledge base, and the public web. The real chasm, though, is using AI for decision-making. And that requires a fundamental re-architecture of almost every product that's out there in the market today. That is going to be the big disruption. And the successful companies are the ones that are either starting with AI decision-making at its core, or have the conviction and the guts to rebuild or throw away their existing product and start over. Most companies can't afford to do that from an R&D standpoint. Few of them we've seen, George Kurtz at CrowdStrike is known to have the guts to make big decisions like that. And we've seen CrowdStrike make some big strides because they've got the guts to make the hard R&D decisions. But I think what we're going to see is every tool today is designed for humans at the center, no matter what. Even at best, with their current architecture, it's humans on the loop. But to truly build a solution that's humans out of the loop, or humans on the loop, or humans out of the loop that are just observing, requires a fundamental re-architecture. And I think what we're going to see is a massive displacement of legacy security providers over the next few years.
Thank you. And for you and the team, I guess a question I have, and the audience would probably want to know this as well, is how was you able to overcome your initial adoption challenges, particularly in regards to trust and understanding amongst the users?
Yeah, back to when we were practitioners and we were told something was vulnerable, our immediate reaction was, sure, I'm sure it's vulnerable. It's probably a false positive and you're going to waste my time. And that is just what we've been conditioned to react to because of all the noise in all of our tools. And so what we said was the only way to build trust with practitioners was to be radically transparent about what we did. So early on, it was all about path, proof, and impact. Show me the kill chain or the attack path. Show me the proof of exploitation every step of the way, and let me run those commands myself if I need to. And then tell me exactly why I need to skip my kid's basketball game to go fix it. What is the impact and why does it matter? And so by being radically transparent about path, proof, and impact, we built trust with those early users. And those early users became radical champions for our company, our product, and our brand. And back to reference-based selling was critical to our growth early on. And now it's all about operationalizing champions and champion-based selling. That's how we're going to cut through the noise in the future.
Thanks for sharing. And from everything that you've explained to me, it sounds that Horizon3 are offering quite a comprehensive suite of features and products, especially in terms of automating and revealing attack paths and providing real-time reporting. Now, a question I have, which is really in relation to the wider cybersecurity space, which is you look at non-human identities and all other elements of security. Horizon3 in the future, do you expect to expand on your product portfolio as, companies as they grow, they often, want to develop new solutions? Is that on the cards?
Yeah. So think about expansion. If you want to expand, you want to expand in very disciplined ways. So there are kind of three dimensions of expansion in any company, including for Horizon3. For one dimension of expansion is gaining access to new markets through platforms. So, for example, being able to get our product to run in FedRAMP environments, so that we can access NATO customers, U.S. defense customers, and so on, or enabling access on the platform to GDPR environments, or to the AWS enclave in Mumbai or in Australia to access those markets. So there is kind of platform expansion to expand our reach, market reach. The second form of expansion is going after adjacent budgets. So the first budget we targeted was the pen testing budget. It's a well-defined, recession-proof budget that we can easily capture, which we have easily captured because we're competing with mediocre consultants. But the natural budget expansion is our results over time start to take out governance, risk, and compliance budgets held by like Security Scorecard and BitSide and other companies like that. So that's an interesting, well-defined budget I can take after. So what is the new budgets we're targeting? And that becomes another dimension of expansion. The third dimension of expansion is new asset types. So we initially focused on on-prem infrastructure because that was the most exploitable environment in most shops. We then expanded to the perimeter, so external, and then we moved to include cloud. And so being able to attack hybrid cloud customers is something we're uniquely awesome at, where I can break through the perimeter, harvest a credential from on-prem, and reuse that credential to compromise your cloud.
Wow.
However, asset expansion now is hacking satellites, self-driving cars, planes, tanks, ships. I mean, I really want to hack submarines and fighter jets and all that stuff. And that's just about asset expansion. So our growth is across those three dimensions. Once again, the hardest part of the job is deciding what not to do. So what do we prioritize first? Do we prioritize budget expansion and go after GRC budgets? Do we prioritize asset expansion, right? So on and so forth. And so that's what we navigate very carefully in the company.
And I have to ask you, Snehal, where did the name Horizon3.ai come from, and what are you doing to stay ahead of the curve in terms of innovation and adapting to emerging threats? That's the second part of the question, of course.
So I often joke it's Horizon3.ai because I couldn't afford .com when I started the company. No, so when I was at GE, we had three waves of business planning. Horizon 1 was the current year of execution. And I think they derived it from like Harvard Business School or something like that. But the Horizon 1 was the current year of execution. Horizon 2 was next year's execution to grow the business. And then Horizon 3 planning was out year disruption that changes how we operate. And so Horizon 3, I didn't want to call us like the Shadow Jesters or some cheesy hacker name. And for me, it was Horizon3.ai because the outsized impact AI is going to have on out year disruption. And this was back in 2019, right? I actually registered I was actually using Horizon 3 for other stuff, I think in 2017 or 2018, something like that. But back in 2019, when I committed, it was Horizon3.ai because of the role AI was going to have in transforming everything we were doing here.
Perfect. And just in terms of a question I have to ask all founders really is, what was one of the biggest lessons that you learned in the early days co-founding Horizon 3?
Team is the absolute most important decision that you're going to make. The right early team with the right personality mix, the right skills mix, and the right empowerment so you fiercely protect their ability to ship code. Team is the most important part early. And then what becomes very hard after that initial team, when you've got 20, 25 employees in the company, is preserving that magic from the early days as you scale. That to me is the single hardest part of scaling a company, is preserving that initial magic. But early on, it's all about your team. The idea doesn't matter. It's the team that you've built and how resilient and adaptable that early team is.
And would another lesson be that being a founder is obviously very hard work, and you expect to work next to all hours of the night? Is that something you would add in there?
Yeah, actually, I would add the second thing is this. Being a founder is a family decision. And if you don't have your family life sorted, you don't have, if you don't have enough money to make sure that the household just runs, if you don't have enough support from your spouse, support for understanding from your kids and so on, you're going to be miserable, because the single biggest stress for founders, myself and others I've talked to, is family stress. It's actually not the work stress itself, unless you're running out of cash. The work stress is actually, you love what you're doing, which is why you started a company around it. It's the family stress from you having to suddenly work nights and weekends, or let your kids go to Disney while you're stuck at the hotel room dealing with a fire. That becomes the big stressor for you as a founder. And so doing your best to manage the family side of it so you can focus on the startup is huge. I'm lucky in that starting a company was a family decision. And for the most part, I've had the support that I've needed to get through it. But my biggest stressor is family stress. It's when my 3-year-old wants to play with me and I've got a surge to a fire for whatever reason. And that's probably the hardest part of being a founder.
But I guess it's exciting to know that you're helping hundreds of customers to further enhance their cybersecurity resilience, risk management, and ultimately put them in a better position than they started with. So having a large impact not just on your family, not on your colleagues, but also your customers, all of that together.
Yeah, and actually the coolest feeling is walking around, whether it's a conference or the city or whatever, and seeing someone wearing a Horizon 3 t-shirt or a Horizon 3 jacket, or seeing a Horizon 3 sticker on their mug. Like, that's cool. I mean, it's such a cool feeling when you see someone wearing the swag of your company.
Thank you for sharing that. And I haven't got there yet. I'm still early in my journey, but I definitely agree that having people know who you are and appreciate your brand is a huge plus. And obviously, if you're able to help people solve their problems, it's massive as well. But just as we move on to the quick fire questions of section of our podcast, I just want to start by asking you, what would be your favorite book on leadership?
There's a book by Robert Greene titled 33 Strategies for War, I think it is. And it's while you could read the book end to end, it's really interesting because it opens your eyes up to the different personalities you're going to encounter. Or in some cases, one person will exhibit, three different personalities in three different situations. And it's a really interesting book that uses history to help you understand the type of personality you're about to deal with. And then, strategies for how to navigate those personalities. So it's a book I reread every couple of years. It's amazing.
I'll be sure to check it out. And in terms of somebody that you've always looked up to, whether from a child or growing up, who's somebody that you really looked up to and really inspired you to be successful?
Yeah, it's such a cheesy answer, but my dad. And the reason why is my dad came to the U.S. from India in the late 60s. Came here for grad school. He could have had an easy life in India, because the family was well known in lawyers and so on. Decided to be an electrical engineer because he wanted to make his own way. Came here on his own, paid his way through grad school. After grad school, full time during the day, he worked the second shift grinding plastics, and then he worked the third shift cleaning out garbage trucks. And so that's what he did to get through grad school, and then that was just kind of the hustle and the grit. And what I really learned from my dad was the definition of grit and overcoming all obstacles to achieve a goal. And didn't matter what it was, and he never made excuses. He just focused and got it done. And that's something that I picked up from him early, and that has kind of underpinned every aspect of what I do, which is that grit to just get stuff done, set your mind to what you want to achieve, and come hell or high water, you're going to get there.
It's a wonderful story. And so many of us have had to look up to our parents and see how hard they've had to work to get to where they've got to. And it's inspired us to really work hard and know, okay, it could be a lot harder for us than it has been. So keep persevering and you'll get there. And just the last quick fire question I have is, what would be the biggest risk in your career that you've taken?
There are many jobs I took that were a lateral move. In fact, a lateral move for less money. Because early on in my career, I prioritized jobs where I would learn the most. Hands down. When I was at IBM, I was on the technical leadership track. So you go through and you become a staff software engineer, then an advisory, then a senior technical staff member. And then you're on the path to becoming a distinguished engineer and an IBM fellow. And about halfway through that path, I decided to completely change gears and leave the technical track to learn how to do product management. And my friends were like, what on earth? Why would you leave for a lateral move that pays less money? And my argument was, look, in the long run, I need to know how to be a good product manager. And I don't know anything about it. I'm going to make a ton of mistakes, but I'm going to do so in a safe place. And I'm going to learn. And then I'm going to build these skills. And those product management skills from 15 years ago are product management experiences and mistakes and lessons I learned that are critical to Horizon 3 today. And so that's just an example. I took a lot of jobs for less pay where I could learn the most.
Not many people do that, but credit to you. It allowed you to learn various different elements that were needed to be successful in this venture that you've set up right now. And just before I ask you a question from our last guest, I just wanted to ask you, if you could describe your leadership style in one word, what would it be?
Trust and empower until proven otherwise.
Thank you. And
I will trust you, I will empower you, and I will let your results do the talking. But if those results don't materialize enough times, it's just my nature. I'm going to write you off and move on.
Well said. And the question from our last guest was a founder of a startup. His question is, how do you ensure that your Gen AI technology, if you use it, does not send data out to your customers? And if it does send the data out, how are you able to ensure that it's saved securely and sent encrypted?
Yeah, this goes back to trust and transparency. If you cannot instill trust and transparency on how data is managed and governed, especially in the LLM era, you're not going to win hearts and minds of your customers. And so we have all sorts of technical documentation for our customers and partners that goes into painstaking detail of exactly what happens with data. Because if you don't, you're not going to gain that trust. You're not going to build that champion.
Thank you. And what would be a question that you'd like to share for the next founder guest that we'll have coming up next week?
I go back. I like the questions you asked around what were the really difficult, like surprisingly difficult aspects of being a founder in the early days. For me, it was managing family stress and professional stress. It'd be interesting to hear what other people say about that.
Thank you. I'll be sure to ask that question next week. And Snehal, I want to say a huge thank you for sharing your invaluable insights with us, your experiences. And before we wrap up, could you share with our listeners where they can learn more about Horizon3.ai? And if they want to get in touch, who would be the best person to learn more about the product and the services?
Yeah, sure. So Horizon3.ai is the website. I eventually could afford Horizon3.com, so I bought that domain too, but it just redirects to Horizon3.ai. The website's one thing. We're very active on social, so especially LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn. You can message me, and for the most part, I'll respond, unless I think you're a Russian asset or something targeting me. And then I think social is probably the best way to engage with you.
And I guess you've got a booth set up at RSA next week, right? Are you excited to get there, and who are you bringing with you?
Yeah, I've got a large portion of my team. We have a really fun welcome happy hour Sunday night at the W. That's always a hit every year. The positive of RSA is you run into a whole lot of people. It's like a reunion. The negative is this one giant petri dish, so I just assume I'll be sick the following 2 weeks. But it could be a fun time. We got a booth. We've got 20 people from Horizon3 that are going to be there, and lots of friends and lots of partners.
Thank you. And I was supposed to be at RSA. I'm not sure if I will get there, as I've got some family commitments to tie into. But for everyone listening, I want to say thank you, Snehal, again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
You take care, and we'll speak again soon.
Okay, see ya.